This episode of the Trek Geeks podcast is brought to you by the Trek Geek Shop. Now you can help support our show and get yourself some cool Star Trek gear at the same time. Check out our line of t-shirts, mugs, hats, and other items for your inner Trek geek at shop.trekgeeks.com.
This is Todd Haberkorn, Mr. Spock on Star Trek Continues, and you're listening to the Trek Geeks podcast with Dan Davidson and Bill Smith. Let's get ready to podcast!
The biggest little show this side of the Alpha Quadrant. Welcome, one and all, to the Trek Geeks podcast. I'm your co-host, Bill Smith, and joining me every single episode. You know, with a week to go now before Star Trek Las Vegas, I can barely put up with him at this point. Imagine how I'm going to feel rooming with him at the Rio for a week. I'm going to want to pull my hair out and possibly pop my own eardrums. More importantly, I'm not going to let him set the alarm clock. He's my co-host, Dan Davidson, and buddy, we're almost there.
You're never going to let me live that down, kind of like you dropping my Enterprise.
Yep.
It's good to be here. Yeah, a week to go, man. You're going to have to deal with me 24/7 because we're not going to sleep ever, for one thing, the whole time.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm old. I'm going to need some sleep.
It's gonna be kind of tiring, I think. A week to go. Episode 69 and Star Trek Beyond. What? Whoa.
I'm amazed that we actually found time to record an episode this week with all this Star Trek happening.
It has been a busy Star Trek week. It has been a fun Star Trek week. It's been one of those weeks that we've been looking forward to, and now that it's happened and all the good stuff that's happened, you kind of can't believe it, but can. It's awesome. Love it.
I agree with you 100%. We've got so much to talk about today. We've got a little bit of news, but mainly we're going to talk about the main event this weekend, Dan.
Yeah, we are going to talk about the release, finally, of Star Trek Beyond. It hit theaters in wide release on Friday. We actually got to see it in IMAX 3D on Thursday. Down in your neck of the woods, you saw it, and I saw it up here in Maine. It has been open for the first full weekend, and we are going to talk about it. We are so excited that it's finally here, and I think it's safe to say, Bill, that we should probably throw out a little spoiler alert.
A little?
A little bit. We might give away a couple of things.
This entire episode is one giant spoiler alert. Let's not kid ourselves or anybody else. If you don't want to know any more, stop now. Go see Star Trek Beyond. And then come back and listen to our spoiler-tastic discussion.
I agree. Good idea.
Another good idea, Dan, is if you tell the folks at home how they can send us their thoughts on Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah, we want to hear everybody's opinion because it is catching on like wildfire out there. So on Twitter, Facebook, and Skype, our handle is Trek Geeks. You can also send us an email at trekgeeks@starfleet.com, or you can give us a call at 508-784-1701. If you have a tablet or a cell phone with internet access, you can go to speakpipe.com/TrekGeeks and leave us a voice message that way as well. Also, as always, the official Facebook group Camp Kittimer is available for you to join. Lots of great discussion out there this weekend, especially with Star Trek Beyond. We do have a spoiler warning out there right now, so no spoilers there. If you join Camp Kittimer, you're going to get early access to the Trek Geeks podcast. So go ahead over to facebook.com/groups/Camp Kittimer, and we will let you right in. And Here it comes. Just please remember that any comments or messages that you leave us in any of these places may be used in a future episode. And with that, I'm going to send it back to the studio and Bill Smith.
Thank you, Dan Davidson. Great job, buddy. Great job.
Sound like Crawl.
Wow. Thank you, I think. We'll talk more about him in a bit. We do want to remind folks that new people are discovering the podcast all the time, and that makes you and me incredibly happy, Dan. To subscribe to Trek Geeks on your iPhone or iPod or other iOS device, head on over to itunes.trekgeeks.com. And if you happen to be an Android device user like my co-host and myself, you can head on over to googleplay.trekgeeks.com. Dan, it's time for the news from TrekNews.net.
I'm going to do that every week now. It's cool.
One of these days, you're going to wind up doing actual Morse code, and I'm going to have no idea what you're saying. You're going to be sending all kinds of subliminal messages to our audience.
Yep. It's going to be, get me out of here.
Well, Dan, there's really only one news story worth talking about this week, and it's the announcement out of San Diego Comic-Con this past weekend. We have a new series title for Star Trek All Access, and we have a brand new ship.
We do, and it is it's exciting. We knew that something was going to be coming out of San Diego Comic-Con, but we didn't know what. We are so thrilled that we now have Star Trek Discovery to look forward to in January of 2017. That announcement came yesterday, I believe, as we record today. A little teaser trailer was shown of a starship called the USS Discovery. NCC 1031 launches in that teaser trailer. So we have a name, we have a ship. We also have a universe because it was announced that this will be set in the Prime universe. One of the major things we don't have yet, though, Bill, is a time frame, which is interesting.
It really is, and there's a lot of discussion going on with that regard. I have my own theory. I'm sure you have yours. Do you want me to go first?
Sure, go right ahead, man.
Given the design of the Discovery, it kind of looks like the abandoned Planet of the Titans Enterprise that eventually morphed into Star Trek Phase 2. I think that it could be post TOS and pre Star Trek the Motion Picture, but that's just me.
I agree with you. I'm hoping it's something a little bit different, just by the way the ship looked. I agree that it could be that time frame. There are some aspects of it that made me think that it could be post Voyager a little bit. It's a little hard to tell.
There are some people who think that the registry number is a clue and it must be pre-TOS because the registry number is 1031. I have no idea. I mean, I don't think there's anything that says that registry numbers had to go in sequential series. You know, so like the 1100s and the 1200s, you know, they could have just picked a number they didn't use before, or maybe it's got some special meaning.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as the developments continue to come out over the next several months. One of the things that I found interesting is when this teaser trailer was released, it is a little bit CGI-ish, I guess is the best way to describe it. But it's also it's like an alpha draft, so to speak, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's going to be tweaked. There's going to be a lot more changes coming down the road. But for what they were able to provide us, I thought it was really cool. I really loved it when the spotlight's shown on the saucer section to see the registry number of the Discovery. I thought that was very cool.
I did too. I think also important to note that Heather Caden, one of the executive producers, in talking to Trek Movie, said that, you know, this was by no means a finished version of CGI, and it may not be the finished version of the Discovery by the time it actually airs. And I found that very interesting.
I found it very interesting as well. One of the things that I liked about the ship when they showed the scene of it clearing that asteroid space dock, whatever it was, and you were seeing it from underneath. The secondary hull kind of reminded me of a Delta shield a little bit.
I can see where you'd say that. I've heard some people say that it kind of mimics a Klingon D7 flipped upside down. Mm-hmm. And I think perhaps those people haven't seen the original Ralph McQuarrie artwork, perhaps. Because the asteroid base is part of that too.
Right. So. Well, it'll be certainly interesting to see what happens over the course of the next several months. I'm pretty much gonna say I'm 199% sure that they're going to have more information that they're going to be revealing in just a week and a half's time out in Vegas. I can't imagine they're not going to have something to tell us while we're out there at the Star Trek 50th anniversary event.
I sure hope so. I mean, I get why they dump a whole lot of info at San Diego, but because a lot of people go there, but I want them to start dumping this info at Star Trek conventions where there are a high concentration of Star Trek, fans.
I agree. I found it also very interesting that the acronym, I guess, is that the word, is going to be DSC for this series. I got a lot of praise for Mr. VP himself, Mr. Van Sitters, for actually correcting people, you and I as well, because we always thought that Voyager was VOY, and that's not actually the case. It's VGR, which makes me think of V'ger from Star Trek, the motion picture, but that's okay. Which
is why I never use VGR.
Yeah.
I'm still going to use VOY. I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry.
John, I'm doing whatever you tell me, so that's all him.
That would be a first. Let's just disabuse people of that notion right now.
Oh, wow. Now, I am, in all seriousness, I love that I loved the Delta. I like the Delta shield that they use in this teaser trailer, which they used a month or two ago when they had the very first glimpse of what was coming. I like that split down the Delta. I got to wonder if there's going to be anything as to what that means, if there is going to be any meaning to it at all. But I thought it looked pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to what's going to be coming down the road. And I'm also very happy that the production team now has their own Twitter handle for the show. I thought that was very exciting as well.
I think that the Delta is interesting because it's clearly fractured and broken into two halves.
Exactly.
Or at least two pieces, not halves. But it makes me wonder if there is some kind of fracture within Starfleet itself.
Mm-hmm. Who knows? We will find out. And how many months is it now? Let's see, July.
About 6 months.
6 months to go. Which, that's right. They needed to wait 6 months after Beyond opened before they started this series. So 6 months to go.
It will be very interesting to see, of course, premiering on CBS television and then all episodes then coming on a weekly basis on CBS All Access. Dan, speaking of waiting a long time for things, I feel like we've been waiting years to talk about Star Trek Beyond, and now we finally can.
Thursday night was pretty exciting, wasn't it?
I felt like a kid at Christmas time. I really did. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's funny because with movies you have to wait a couple of years or a few years in between each one. I don't remember the excitement for past movies that I had for this one. This one, maybe it's because it's the 50th anniversary. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, Thursday during the day went by excruciatingly slow for me, waiting for that 7 o'clock start time.
Oh, it was painful. I didn't work that day, and the day just clicked by very, very slowly. I watched the first two movies. I figured, I'll take up a good chunk of the day with this. Yeah, I was done by 11 a.m.
Yeah, it's really exciting when something like this happens. And I got to the theater, and there were already a lot of people in line. It was busy. There was a lot of excitement. I actually got a couple compliments for my Trek Geek shirt, so maybe we have a couple new listeners this week. I don't know, but What a fun ride. It was a great movie. We're going to get into details about it, but it was everything I had hoped it would be.
Before we press on with details, let me ask you about your experience attending in Maine where you went. Was the theater very full?
It was not sold out, but it was very full. There's quite a long hallway from the IMAX door entrance to where you actually get into the corridor. It's quite a long corridor. That was full all the way to the entrance and then wrapped down around the wall, back all the way down the other side of the wall. I would say it was more than 3/4 full for the actual film. And I don't know if I attribute that just to the fact that it was an earlier film, because when we got out, the 9:30 showing was getting ready and it looked pretty busy then as well. Doing some reading this weekend, it looks like just Thursday night alone, it pulled in almost $5 million in the United States. So that it looked like it did pretty good in its small showing Thursday night.
In the theater I was in New Hampshire, there were maybe 100 people in the IMAX theater. It was by no means even close to half sold.
Wow.
I was very surprised by that, because 3 years ago for Inner Darkness, in the fan sneak Thursday night premiere, it was jam-packed.
Huh, that's interesting. No, there was definitely a lot more people at mine than that.
Interesting. That's good to know.
Yeah. We're everywhere.
We as we record this, my wife and I went today at a different theater, and I'd say it was probably about 3/4 of the way filled. So that's a good audience for matinee.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think the early estimates, I read an article this morning, which I never really understand how they can write these things. They say that the weekend gross for the movie is going to be somewhere in the $60 million range. But the article came out on Sunday morning, so I don't know how they can take into account what happens during the day today. But $60 million is still on the high end of the estimates for the weekend's pull for the movie, which I think is fantastic.
I do too. I'm going again, Tuesday, the day this episode drops.
Nice. 3 times in 5 days, man. That's pretty awesome. I will be seeing it for the second time next weekend, I believe.
Wow, way to go, superfan.
I have to work, I got to do stuff. My kid's going to college. Come on, give me some slack, man.
Some of us don't have to work right now.
Well, I didn't mean it like that, but yeah.
Well, Dan, let's talk about the basic plot, and perhaps we'll just talk each other through it. We're not going to talk about what we liked and what we didn't. Let's just sort of go through the plot as we remember it, instead of doing like an official tied up recap.
I like it. Okay.
So at the beginning of the movie, I had no idea how it was going to start. Mm-hmm. For the last couple of movies, they've actually previewed the opening scenes, like in theaters months before,
right,
like another IMAX release. And so when this started, it was Kirk talking to, aliens in what looked like a first contact situation.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. They looked pretty menacing, those aliens, at first, as Kirk was trying to be a neutral party and some kind of negotiation, offering them a gift. The aliens didn't like it too well, and they came down at him charging and looked like he was going to be in big trouble until you realized that they were little tiny creatures, which made for a quite comical opening, I thought.
I thought it was brilliant. So Kirk gets out of there, he gets back to the Enterprise, and he's weary is the only word I can come up with. They've been in space for almost 1,000 days. And every day is bleeding into the next. He makes the comment that it feels episodic almost, which I thought was kind of humorous.
I thought that was good, yep.
And he's clearly not, the Horatio Hornblower-esque James T. Kirk that we're used to from the original series.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind at the beginning for me is that he was bored. I think he was thinking that it was going to be a lot more exciting being captain of a starship and doing this 5-year mission, and I don't think it was up to what his expectations were. So he was getting bored, and I think he was thinking he made the wrong decision to become captain and go out on the 5-year mission.
So then they make their way to this amazing new Starbase Yorktown, which looks like a cross between let me see if I can get this right the first time I describe it. Sort of a Dyson sphere meets Deep Space Nine meets the staircases at Hogwarts and Harry Potter meets Inception.
That is as perfect as a description as I think you can get. We'll talk about the Yorktown later on, I think. But one of the things that I thought was amazing with this is when the ship gets to the Yorktown and goes into the Yorktown, the Enterprise is tiny compared to this place. I mean, tiny. So the size of it is just beyond description. So yeah, they get to the space station and they're on leave, and you get to see Sulu's husband and their daughter, and it looks like Spock and Uhura break up, and McCoy's giving Spock a hard time about it. And one thing that we forgot to mention right before they get there is that it's Kirk's birthday.
Yes.
I thought that was a good reference point to previous movies, I thought.
Yeah, and it continues the character trait of Kirk that he's just never really been big on his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
So we're at Yorktown. Kirk is thinking maybe he's going to leave the captaincy of the Enterprise and take a vice admiral position there at Yorktown. But the Enterprise winds up going out on one additional mission when this ship comes to Yorktown with, you know, somebody who says their crew is stranded on a planet on the other side of a nebula.
Yes. Before they go out on that mission, or what we think might be Kirk's last as captain, in addition to Kirk talking about sending in his resume for a vice admiral position, we find out that Spock gets some rather troubling news from a couple of Vulcans that are at the station as well. And this was the first of many emotional moments in the movie, I thought.
Oh, I agree with you. We find out that Ambassador Spock, or Spock Prime, has died, which was really interesting when they showed the star dates, you know, sort of bookending his life. It's you figure he's probably only about 33 years old.
Yeah, that's right.
He's more like probably 233 at this point.
You got to wonder what was going through the mind of this universe Spock to get that note and to be looking at that obituary of himself, kind of, when you think about it. It's his future self from the other universe.
I agree with that. We'll talk more about that later on, but
Sure.
we'll get through the plot for now in as quick a fashion as we can. So they go through the nebula, which looks amazing. They get to this planet called Altamid, and there's this ship, which turns out to be a swarm of ships that absolutely kicks the crap out of the Enterprise.
The Enterprise always gets the crap kicked out of it in the movies. We've talked about that before. This was beyond anything that we've seen before. This was amazing to watch. It was painful to watch, and it was brilliantly done. You got to see the nacelles get chopped off right at the base. You got to see the neck of the saucer section. The same thing happened. Pretty much the command was to cut off the head, which they certainly did. And the crash sequence, as everybody got split up, was beautiful, quote unquote, to watch. It was great special effects. It was really, really good and sad at the same time.
So then Krall and his drones are aboard the Enterprise, and they're looking for the very same artifact that Kirk had at the beginning of the movie with the wee itty bitty aliens.
Yeah, he is looking for it pretty frantically. He thinks there's a couple good battle scenes with Kirk and Krall. Kirk does have it. He escapes. It gets away from them. A lot of confusion going on in the ship about what's going to be happening and who's where and how many crew are accounted for. Krall does not get the device, but looks like neither does Kirk.
Yeah, and so then everybody winds up on the planet. The Enterprise saucer crash lands. Everybody's split up except for the majority of the crew is being herded by the swarm because their escape pods have been captured by the drones as they've left the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. So, wow, I feel like that whole sequence took like a half an hour, even though it didn't.
Wow, I thought it actually felt like longer than half an hour. It's amazing that it was only, 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So we have a split of all the different primary characters. We have Kirk and Chekhov are together, and we have Spock and Bones, which I thought was brilliant. Uhura was actually captured by Krall, so he's with her. And Sulu is one of the people that is in the herd of prisoners, so to speak. So there's different bounce backs between the different groups. And then we come along with Scotty, who when he lands on the planet, and he comes across a new alien and a new character in the Star Trek franchise, and she was awesome, and that's Jayla.
Yeah, I really did not expect a whole lot from Jayla because I didn't want to have, the wrong idea of what her character was going to be going into it. Mm-hmm. And I thought that it added a nice degree of difference in this story.
I thought it was a great female role in this Star Trek film. I actually thought that she was a stronger character in this one than Uhura was. And that's not to take anything away from any of the cast. I just thought that Jayla had a lot more in the storyline, and she did a great job with what she was given for this film.
So let's encapsulate what happens on the planet like Reader's Digest style.
Okay.
So they realize that, the Magnificent Seven, the main crew, have to get together. They've got to rescue everybody else. Jayla helps them. They find out that Jayla's been hiding out in an old starship in NX 326, I think it was, the USS Franklin.
326 or 325?
I thought it was 326.
I'll check that.
Okay.
All right.
And, they've got to create a diversion and go rescue the crew and beam them aboard the Franklin and then get the Franklin into space to stop the swarm because Krall's real plan is to attack and kill everything at Starbase Yorktown. Fair?
I would say that's very fair. It's very succinct and very Reader's Digest-y.
Well, I don't want the plot discussion to take up an hour.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So we're on the planet. All these things happen on the planet, and they finally do get off the planet. The swarm is on its way towards the Yorktown, and Kirk and team are on the Franklin chasing it. There are countless swarm vehicles on the way to the Yorktown, and they really don't know what they're going to do in order to stop these things until Scotty and Jayla come up with a very interesting idea.
They decide that they can disrupt the communication between the swarm ships by essentially broadcasting something really loud and boisterous over what amounts to a radio frequency. So they broadcast Sabotage by the Beastie Boys and a call back to the 2009 movie. Yep. And those ships become so disoriented that they just start blowing up. Krall and a couple of the drones get through to Starbase Yorktown, and the Enterprise is in pursuit. Spock and Bones have commandeered a swarm vessel and are going after him as well. And long story short, the Franklin is able to stop Krall and the drones by essentially popping up out of the river, if you will, breaching like a whale.
Yes.
And having the ships run into the hull and stick like darts.
Mm-hmm. And as they are searching for Krall, he has the biological weapon with him, and they figure out that he wants to get to, I guess it's the giant filter system at the top of the Yorktown is the best way to describe it, that if he can get the weapon there, it will disperse out to the entire space station, killing everyone. So there's a great chase scene and a great fight with Kirk and Krall in this control room at the top of a building to access the, I don't know if filtration system is the right word,
sure,
but that's what I'll go with right now.
Well, before that, though, they also discover that Krall is really Captain Balthazar Edison of the USS Franklin, who should be at this point maybe 150 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he certainly looks alien during the movie, but as he, sucks the life out of prisoners, he gets more and more human looking. So by the end of the movie, with the final battles, he looks as human as he can, complete with a Starfleet gold tunic, which I thought was pretty cool. As he and Kirk fight to see if they can, if he can get that biological weapon launched into the quote-unquote atmosphere of the space station.
So, long story short, Krall doesn't succeed. He gets sucked out into space. Spock and Bones save Kirk. And Yorktown is safe. They get to the end of the movie. There's a little impromptu party for Kirk. Well, before that, Kirk decides he's going to stay on board the Enterprise as captain, and Spock decides he's going to stay. And then we discover that there's a ship under construction as they gather, and it's the NCC 1701A. So they get a replacement Enterprise.
And then to end the film, you hear the famous speech, Space the Final Frontier speech, but it is actually mixed in with every one of the main cast voices, which I thought was pretty cool. And then it warps off to the next movie.
Yeah. I thought that was a really nice way to end the episode. I thought it was a nice touch. You know, everybody had a moment in the movie, and then everybody got a moment to end the movie with the prologue speech, if you will.
I like what you just said there, Bill, because we're going to get into it later on, but you said you liked how they ended the episode, because I think that's a very important part of what we're going to talk about later.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you mean, but we'll keep pressing on.
That's right.
So, Dan, let's talk about some things we liked about this film overall, and we'll let you go first.
Sure. I felt that, I'll go right into what I was going to say a minute ago. I felt that this was an episode. It was an original series episode to me. Right from the very beginning, with a captain's log, Kirk talking about what's going on the ship, I thought that it had a lot of TOS feel to it. And I think that was done purposefully. And I think that they were able to do it in a very successful way.
Oh, I think so too. It definitely felt more like Star Trek than the previous two movies by a long shot. Mm-hmm. I think that they did that Simon and Doug Young did a phenomenal job creating a story that respected the original series, but created some new ground that was believable in the scope of those characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we've hoped, and that's what we've been hoping would be the case for a while as we get ready for the movie to come out. One of the things that I liked was how in this movie / episode, they split up everybody, and they split up people in ways that we didn't expect they would be split up. I thought that the Kirk Chekhov aspect was great. So you have the captain teaching the young crew member a lot of things when they're together. And I really liked how they went back to the original series with the McCoy and Spock bickering aspects when it was them together. But at the same time, you saw that close, I don't know if friendship is the right word, or respect maybe is a better word, that they both had.
I thought that those scenes between Carl Urban and Zach Quinto were amazing. I think they were some of the best of the movie. Mm-hmm. You know, not only the scene where, you know, you see them after they've crash landed and Bones is trying to, you know, essentially pull that piece of metal out of Spock and then close off the wound. But later on, when they're in that shelter and, you know, Spock talks about the fact that Spock Prime has died and, you know, he's thinking about leaving Starfleet to carry on his work. Just great character beats that we haven't gotten up until now.
Yeah. Get your beep ready, because I thought that the horse line by Spock was an instant classic. I thought that was hysterical and totally unexpected. It's one thing for Bones to say it, even in a movie. I know we know that they have language in the movies, but when Spock said it, I thought that was just hysterical.
There were a lot of funny moments from Spock, like there were for Leonard Nimoy in the original series.
Yeah, yeah.
And they weren't over the top.
No, I agree. They were subtle, but memorable. I thought, but this one was great. It's one that I laughed out loud, as did everybody in the theater. I thought it was really great. Other things that I liked, I said it a few minutes ago. I thought the character of Jayla was fantastic. The makeup was amazing. The eyes, the contacts that she wore for this part were just awesome. It really gave her character a lot of depth, I think. I liked her dialogue and the way that she spoke, and she pretty much kicked ass when she had to. So it was a great character, and I love how they left it wide open for her to be in the next one.
Yeah, especially if she makes it through the academy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have to say that I really appreciated Chris Pine as Perk. Chris Pine as Kirk more this time than I did in the other movies too, because his Kirk was more mature and decidedly more mature.
Yep.
I thought that it was closer to the Kirk we know, although it's never going to be that Kirk, let's be honest.
Right.
But it was easily recognizable as James T. Kirk.
Yep.
I thought he did actually a great job and didn't just he wasn't the Trent Dilfer of the cast, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't playing not to lose, he was playing to win in this.
Right. Yeah, did just a fantastic job. I don't think we can talk about the things that we like in this movie if we don't talk about the action sequences. We hear all the time that people are not happy with the JJ movies because they're just basic action films and they're not true to Star Trek. I think the action sequences in this movie helped make it a Star Trek episode. The Enterprise destruction scene was amazing. The Franklin scenes were great, and of course at the end with the swarm, whether or not you like the idea of having the Beastie Boys be the savior of the day or not, the special effects and the action in those scenes was, I think, the best that we've seen for the 3 Kelvin timeline films.
I think you're probably correct about that. I think when the first or the second trailer, whichever one it was, everybody, whined about, where they said it's going to be a Fast and the Furious in space. Let's just get this out of the way now. Mm-hmm. This movie was by no means the Fast and the Furious in space. I've seen the Fast and Furious movies. Mm-hmm. It was nothing like those.
No, I think they just say that because of the director, and they were afraid that he was going to bring that in, and that first trailer seemed to get everybody's gander going, or however you want to call it. I thought that the action was never over the top. There were some times where it was close to being a little bit, okay, let's tone it down a little bit, but nothing that I was like, okay, this is making it not enjoyable for me. Yeah. I really thought that I just thought that the scenes with the Enterprise destruction were just amazing. I'm always watching these movies and I'm like, okay, is this something I'm going to see that looks too CGI-ish? The technology today, it looks like it's really happening. It doesn't look fake at all. And they hit the home run with this one. I really enjoyed it.
Well, especially when you see it in like IMAX 3D.
Yeah.
You and I both saw it that way on Thursday night.
Yep.
And I saw it in 2D today, and it was a little underwhelming after having seen it in IMAX 3D, a couple of nights ago.
It's interesting that you say that because we were about midway up in our seats in IMAX, and because the screen is so huge, I did feel at times that I might have been missing something because there was stuff going on. Like you have to turn your whole head sometimes to see from corner to corner what's going on. And I'm wondering if when I do see it next weekend, I will see it in a non-IMAX 3D, and it'll be interesting to see if I feel the same about it as what you just said a moment ago.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked, and you weren't sure how you felt about this a couple of weeks ago based on one of the trailers, I really liked the different looks, or angles of the Enterprise that Justin Lin gave us in this movie. I thought they were neat. I thought they were creative. I think they showed a perspective of the Enterprise that we've never seen in other movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate how much love he gave the treatment of those angles.
Yes.
Before he destroyed the ship.
Yes. I will say that what you're referencing is when they're leaving the Yorktown, the camera angle, it's like the camera guy is sitting on the deflector dish looking at the neck of the Enterprise, and you can see the engines behind it as it leaves the space station. In the second trailer, when I saw that, I didn't really like it. I thought it looked awkward. And it might be because it was only for a couple of seconds in the trailer. When I saw it in the movie the other night, it was for a lot longer shot. And to me, maybe because it was in IMAX, it was much more interesting, and I liked it a lot more than I did previously.
Yeah, I thought he did a really nice job setting up those shots. Overall, I think he did an amazing job with his Star Trek film, quite honestly.
I think he did, and I'm actually hopeful. I know that we have no idea yet, but I would be very happy if he was the director for the next one.
I think he's gone a long way with this movie to silence his critics who were thinking that he couldn't do anything but Fast and Furious.
Yep.
He proved himself, not that he needed to, certainly. Let's state that, but he proved himself a tremendously talented director. And I thought this was an amazing installment in the franchise.
Yeah, it was. I'm going to talk about what my favorite of this movie was.
Yeah.
And I think everybody is going to pick this as their favorite moment. It was an oh my God moment. I literally said that out loud in the theater when it happened. And that was towards the end of the movie when Spock was opening up Ambassador Spock's belongings, and he picked up that case and opened it up, and it was a picture of the Prime Universe crew from Star Trek 5 or 6.
No, it was 5.
It was 5, yeah. That was an oh my God, nobody could have prepared me for that moment.
The first time I saw it, and he started to slide it open, and I got the slightest hint of the Monster Maroon uniform. I immediately felt my eyes well up with tears.
Absolutely. Yep, me too. I thought that there could not have been a more poignant tribute to the 50th anniversary than that. I thought that was completely beautiful, and for that not to get leaked is a tribute to everybody working on that film, because I'm glad that we didn't have any idea that was coming.
Yeah, I loved that I was blown away by that. And I think it was a perfect note for the movie.
I do too. I said to you when we were chatting after we saw the movie, I said, I think the only way that could have been more perfect was if it was a picture of the crew from the original series and not one of the movies. And you had a very, very interesting answer to that. And my wife actually shared the exact same meaning for why it was so good to have that picture instead of TOS.
Yeah, I think it meant more that it was from the movie era of that cast, because it showed that those relationships endured, and it showed that crew endured, and it showed that they made it through so much, and they did it together, and that Spock was a part of it.
Yep.
And that was how Prime Spock lived his life.
Right.
And I think that obviously we won't know unless, maybe it's in the novelization at some point, but I have to believe that went into, Kelvin Spock's calculus in deciding to stay aboard the Enterprise. Oh,
yes. I would be very shocked if that wasn't part of the reason. And it'll be good to see if it is in a novelization form, but I don't doubt it for a second. I'm sure it was. Was that your favorite moment?
Hands down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to be one of those never forget moments in Star Trek history. I thought that could not have been a better tribute, like I said, to both the 50th and to Leonard and all of the other casts that we've lost over the years. I thought it was beautiful.
So let's talk about the aspects we didn't like so much. And I imagine this is going to be a much shorter conversation.
Yeah, I think it'll be shorter, but as Trek fans, we'll point out the things that we don't like. It's by no means bashing anything. It's just things that were more nitpicky to me. Yeah. I'll get to my biggest one last. I'll talk about my biggest concern or dislike last. But I will say that for me, I found that Zachary Quinto's Spock is much more emotional than I'm used to seeing with the Spock character. It's not really a negative, but it's more of it just doesn't feel right to me. I understand he's much younger than the Spock we know, and that he's half human, but he seems to be a hell of a lot more emotional than any Vulcan I've ever seen, and that's including to Paul and Sybok. It works in some areas, like when, like in the Spock's belonging scene, when he opens that picture and when he actually sees that Prime Spock has died. But I didn't think it really worked, even though it was because he was delusional and really sick, when he started laughing uncontrollably with McCoy. I just didn't know if that worked right.
Oh, I disagree. I thought it worked very well.
And now why?
For those reasons. I mean, because, you brought up Sybok and you brought up to Paul. Neither of them are half human. Mm-hmm. This Spock was more emotional in the first two movies, but let's be honest, in this one, he showed less emotion for most of the movie than he did in the other two.
I agree with that, and let me jump in and say I don't mean just this movie. I mean in all three movies we've seen a much more emotional Spock than we're used to. I mean, with the death of his mother and the attack on Kirk that he had on the bridge in the first one, those are all. I mean those all, but I just brought out the specific examples for this movie as a couple of the examples that I meant.
Well, and that was by design, and they were outward about that since 2009, because the Spock doesn't have as good a handle on his human side as Prime Spock did. Mm-hmm. So I actually thought the scene with McCoy, where he smiled and chuckled a little bit, I thought it was incredibly disarming, and it went a long way to talking about how comfortable he felt with McCoy, even though he's essentially bleeding to death internally.
Well, see, that's where I saw it a little bit differently. I saw that as he was having a very interesting and not emotional conversation, but one that, he was showing sides to McCoy that he might not have shown before, and it was working. But then when he started laughing, I took it as, wow, is he so close to death that he's losing control completely of his normal holding on to his emotions? And is that something that we would want to see this character go through?
I don't think he was close to death. I do think he was, weary and suffering from blood loss and the like. And, in those moments, perhaps his human side is going to poke through a little more. We never saw Spock this hurt.
That's true.
Ever.
Yep.
He died in Star Trek 2, but, it was a little different. He wasn't, it was radiation poisoning. He wasn't bleeding to death internally, or so we believe.
Right. Now, again, let me say that in no way is taking anything away from what Zachary does as Spock. He is so great at this character. He does a phenomenal job. I just thought that at times the emotion was a little bit, to me, it was like, I don't want to say it was forced, because it didn't look forced, but I was kind of sitting back going, a little bit more than I normally would.
Okay.
So
I think for me, I mean, I can sum up the aspects I didn't like really in the same sentence. And really, for me, it's really the only thing, and it is a little nitpicky, but I don't think that the script did enough to explain Krall and the Franklin.
Yep.
There's not enough there to talk about Krall's motivation, why he bothered with the life prolongation, or why he needed to essentially, suck the energy out of people, and why it changed his appearance. Mm-hmm. And then, how come the Franklin was still space-worthy?
Yeah, you think?
How
many years have been there? Let me get back to the Krall thing for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, I'm gonna share with folks, hopefully she won't mind, but my wife loved the movie, but she had some problems with it. She's not as big a Trek fan as I am, obviously, or as you are, but she knows Trek and she loves it, or likes it a lot. That was her biggest thing. Who is this guy? What's the story behind this planet and the equipment, and why he looks the way he does? How did he get that way? There wasn't enough in the movie to explain that. If there's a backstory, that's fine. But if you're trying to get a new audience to really grasp onto Trek, having those gaps in the movie, I think hurts.
They tried to answer some of it with, when they discovered who he really was. Mm-hmm. But I still don't think it gave enough insight as to his motivation.
Right. I don't. And why does he look like a giant lizard?
Well, I have to believe because he sucked the life energy out of somebody who looked like that.
Oh, so you're thinking that when he sucked the life out of humans, that's why he started looking human?
Yeah.
That's a good theory. I like that. I hadn't actually thought of that. We'll have to see what happens. I'm sure there's going to be some backstory novel or comics coming out that might explain it. But that was something that was a question mark. The other thing in regards to him and the planet that was a little unrealistic to me was the swarm. It was, don't get me wrong, the swarm is awesome, but it was unrealistic to me because at the end of the film, when they're heading towards the Yorktown, there had to have been billions of those little ships swarming when it was the giant tidal wave. Mm. The logistics of that just don't add up to me when you take into consideration that there were probably a whole bunch of them lost on the attack of the Enterprise, and the time frame, where are all those ships stored? Where, who's manning them all? Is it just him controlling all of them? It just was a little bit to me. It still made for a hell of a sequence when that was happening, when the Franklin was fighting him, but that was a little bit over the top. If there was an over the top moment, it would be the number of those ships because it looked infinite.
That's fair. I can understand that. I assume that when they sent there were drones, that for the most part the ships were not controlled by. Yeah. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but again, we didn't have that detail.
Yeah. Well, that's what it comes back to, the detail of it. Hopefully we'll be able to have some history down the road with it. But it leaves question marks. And like I said, if you're a first-time fan looking forward to seeing a Star Trek movie and maybe starting to like the franchise, those might be things that you walk out of the movie theater going, the movie was great, but didn't make sense because of X, Y, and Z. And those were two of those reasons. So
do you have any other nitpicks?
I don't know if this is a nitpick, but this might surprise and maybe upset some people. I'm going to say it right out. I did not like the Yorktown at all. I did not like it. And you said at the beginning, your description was great. When we first saw it and they were coming up to it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Then we saw the size of it and I'm like, Dyson Sphere. That's all I could think of was Dyson Sphere. And we know from a previous Trek Geeks podcast how much I don't like the Dyson Sphere. But I thought of it. I will say I did like the little catacombs that the Enterprise was going through and then the Franklin later. But I did not like the idea of it based on its sheer size and a couple of other reasons, which I'll break down for you. They're supposed to be in the reaches of space where they never have been before. But this thing is gigantor. So how long did it take to construct this? Who engineered it? The thing is freaking huge. How long did it take to get to where it was going to be if it wasn't built right where it was? I mean, just the logistics of that are kind of mind-boggling. And if it's there on the edge of known space, wouldn't you think they would have explored that area before they put a gigantic space station there?
Well, you don't know that they didn't. They couldn't get through the nebula because none of the ships at Yorktown could navigate it. The Enterprise had as Kirk said, the most advanced navigation system in the fleet. So the Enterprise could, but none of the ships that Yorktown had at that moment could.
Well, that's why I would hesitate to put a station of that size and importance that close to an area that they couldn't penetrate.
Well, somebody had to penetrate at some point, and they would need to use that as a launching platform.
Okay, I can give you that.
Because the Enterprise went there on a provisioning stop.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So here's the other thing, too. And I get what you're saying about what's it doing out there where they're supposed to be exploring, but all throughout the original series, the Enterprise was constantly stopping at star bases that were already out there.
Yep.
So it's not a big deal to me that the Yorktown exists. and that it's theoretically where no man has gone before because, we've set that precedent 50 years ago.
Let me put it this way, then. If the Yorktown was a station that reminded us of K7, I might not have had as much of a problem with it. But the sheer size of it, and here's the other thing, the multiple angled cities, so to speak, in there, I just thought that was nuts. Each one had its own gravity, and yet they were right next to each other. I just the thinking of how how they could have the artificial gravity the certain way for just a specific angled city, it just was a little bit too much for me.
Well, we don't know who built it. We don't know that it was the Federation that built it. Somebody else could have, or several, races of aliens could have built it and asked the Federation to administer it, much like Deep Space Nine.
That's something I haven't actually thought of either. I've always assumed that it was a Federation-built station.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's not.
Interesting.
So I don't have as big a problem with the Yorktown because, I think if it were a dinky little starbase, it wouldn't matter that much.
Yeah, I still would have. Maybe K7 would be too small, but I just thought this was like an, oh my God, that's like giant. I mean, remember the star bases in Star Trek 3 or Star Trek 4? Those were gigantic, but those were not unrealistic to me in terms of the Star Trek universe, whereas this one was.
Well, remember, too, they said that, there were people from every member world of the Federation living at Yorktown. Mm-hmm. So I think that this was meant to represent the entire Federation and be something where millions of people lived, and you wouldn't get that at your average starbase. I think that this is a stand-in for everything the Federation represents, which is why it was such a target for Krall.
Let me ask you this. Was the Yorktown something that has been in either a novel or something in the past? It seems to me that I can remember something about this giant space station that looks different. Am I thinking of something else?
I have no idea.
I don't know if we had a discussion about this or not. I'll have to look it up, but I thought that this was pulled from something, and it's kind of an homage to a previous thing of Roddenberry's. I'll have to dig about that.
I know there were Federation ships named Yorktown.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
but not star bases per se.
Okay, so all right.
Well, does that do it for things you didn't like?
For the most part, yeah. Those are the things that I jotted down. I mean, there was so much to like. I thought that that Uhura's character wasn't given a whole lot, which was too bad. I do like how they had the whole necklace thing be the savior. I thought that was kind of cutesy. But I thought that her character in the last two movies, that she had some good scenes. I just thought that, unfortunately, to me, she didn't have as strong a presence as she has in the other two.
Well, that may have been because when she started filming this, she had just come back from having babies. Mm-hmm. She had twins.
Yep.
So I know that from having seen Zoe Saldana on Good Morning America this past week.
Yep.
So maybe that had something to do with it. But I thought that substantively they gave her a little more to do with the, being the primary foil for Krall for, the middle section of the movie.
Here's one thing that I thought of that I wanted to get your opinion on. I haven't asked you that, so it's going to be the first you've heard of it. Do you think that, and I know that he made mention of it in the film himself, do you think Kirk made a huge mistake by trusting that woman so early on the way he did?
Yeah.
That was surprising to me. Because when she first came on and then the Universal Translator was kicking in for the first time and they were talking, I'm like, something's not right with her. And they seem to be welcoming her way too easy. I would have,
I think maybe I would have sent some recon, maybe a probe, maybe a shuttle.
Yeah.
But instead, I suppose it's in character for Kirk because he just sort of marches right in and says, all right, let's check this out.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. And you got to imagine the level of guilt that he had, because that everything that happened in the movie stemmed from that trust of her to try to go find her quote unquote crew.
Which is why I think he's so angry.
Yeah, I really thought he was going to kill her when he pulled the phaser on her.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think if it wasn't for Chekhov, I think he would have.
So, Dan, let's start wrapping up our discussion, and we'll talk about two particular points. Not, whether or not, did we like it, because that's fairly obvious, but let's consider that in the scope of how this reflects the original series and the homage it pays it, and where does this fall in the stack ranking of all Star Trek movies?
I'll answer the second part of that question first, and then I'll listen to what you think about your first part before I answer mine. I think that...
Wait, you don't get to create the rules.
Oh, come on now. I get to every once in a while.
No, you don't.
I think that this is quite possibly one of the top, not the top, but one of the top films that Star Trek has put out. I would rank it 2 or 3, maybe. If in thinking about all the different ones, I think I would put Wrath of Khan, obviously, is probably always going to be the number 1 film. I don't think there'll be anything that'll ever top that. I would put that as this is number 2, right up there with First Contact, I think, is one of the top ones. And as much as people may not like to hear it, I think 2009 is one of the best ones also. I just have always enjoyed that one.
Interesting.
So I think it's definitely in the top. I'll just say this as a broad number. It's definitely in the top 5, and I think it may even be higher than that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And to go back to your first question, it reflects TOS perfectly, because we always have been asking for a TOS version of a movie. And the inner conflict, the just the look and feel of it being an episode, like I said at the beginning, with the captain's log and the different threads of the movie that are going on, it felt like an original series episode to me. I think the turmoil, I think the inner conflict that many of the characters show in this film reflect TOS. There wasn't anything that I could actually put a specific finger on as to how the original series took a current event and made it an episode. There was nothing in this film that I could really point to do that, but it still felt like an original series episode to me.
Well, and Star Trek is replete with its crazy captain storylines.
Yes.
So I don't know that it necessarily needed to reflect the real world, because, they can always fall back on that type of story. And I think they told that story well.
Yes. Yeah, he was Looney Tunes.
Captain Simon Van Gelder. I thought it reflected the original series really well. I think that this was truer to the TOS characters that we know, while still maintaining the difference of the Kelvin timeline. Mm-hmm. And I think that it respected Star Trek. The complaint that a lot of the new Trek haters like to use is, well, it's not Gene's vision, it's not Gene's vision. And I think that this one comes closest to actual Star Trek than the two before it. And honestly, I think that's why I love this one so much.
Yeah. I got to say, I am tired of that phrase.
Me too.
Was Deep Space Nine Gene's vision? Hell no, but it's my favorite series.
Wrath of Khan wasn't Gene's vision.
Yeah, and he was involved in it.
Well, kind of.
Well, in a kind of roundabout way. Watch the special edition DVD and you'll find out what we're talking about.
That's right. I think that it did a good job reflecting and respecting the Star Trek we've known for 50 years. And I think that that's really the ultimate compliment that this film can pay. If I look at a stack ranking for me, and I actually wrote this out. So my stack ranking of all the Star Trek films goes like this. At number 1 is Wrath of Khan. At number 2 is The Undiscovered Country. Number 3 for me is Star Trek Beyond. Number 4 is First Contact. And then Voyage Home, the motion picture, Star Trek 2009, Search for Spock, Insurrection, Final Frontier, Into Darkness, Nemesis, and then Generations at the bottom.
I like that list. I like it.
That's my list. I think this is the best Star Trek movie since First Contact, and for me, and I've already caught a little bit of grief for this, for me, I think it's better than First Contact.
Like I said, I haven't decided if I would put it above or beyond First Contact. First Contact was so great because it was the first Borg movie. It had a lot of stuff that we didn't expect in a Trek film. I'm not sure where I would put it, if I would put it above or below it. They're both so great. I do like the fact that you put Star Trek 6 in your top 5. I hadn't actually thought of that one. And I also like that you put 2009 as high as you did. I think that with what happened, and let me back up a step. I remember when we talked about Into Darkness, we both were freaking out, loving it after the first time we saw it, if I remember correctly. And it's amazing how that has changed over time for both of us. I don't see that happening with this at all. At all.
No, I don't either.
Yeah. There were so many things within a Darkness when we started really thinking about it that were problematic and weren't true to Gene's vision. I'm just kidding. I mean, true to Star Trek. But this one hit so many of them correctly that I don't think even after time and even after seeing it several times will take anything away from it. I'm going to have to go back and really do some deep thinking about where exactly I would rank this with all the other ones and get a definitive list instead of just, I think I would put it here, maybe above or below this one. And maybe I'll have that for us next week.
I think that this film is the perfect way to celebrate Star Trek's 50th anniversary.
Without a doubt.
There's your soundbite.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Dan, that sort of wraps our discussion on Star Trek Beyond. And I know I'm seeing it at least a couple more times this week.
I don't think I'm going to have the time to see it this week, but I am seeing it this weekend. Maybe I'll try to squeeze it in twice. I'm not sure. I'm not as cool as you are, obviously.
If by cool you mean unemployed, then yes, that's true.
Whatever. Works for me, man.
Dan, as usual, we're continuing our iTunes subscribe and review campaign.
Yeah, we love hearing from the reviews. And we always say, we've been saying from the beginning, we want to hear from you whether you have good things to say or whether you have things that you don't like about the show and things that we can improve on. Luckily, it's been pretty much all positive, and we really appreciate it and love hearing from everyone. We want everybody to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, so if you can do that, go to trekgeeks.com/iTunes to learn more. And if you do a review, you are going to be automatically entered to win a $25 Amazon gift card or whatever that monetary value is if you do not use dollars.
The equivalent thereof.
Thank you. That's why you're better talking than I am.
That's so true in so many ways. I have to tell you, I was at the movies with my friend Scott Vachon to go see Star Trek Beyond, and he kept waiting for you to mess up the word slipstream in the Timeless episode to the point where I'd have to bleep it.
I got better at the end. Slipstream. Manotereme.
Still saying it wrong.
I do that on purpose now.
Sure you do. One thing we're not saying wrong is how much we love 5-Year Mission. They are your house band for Star Trek Las Vegas and the 50th anniversary convention in Nevada 1 week from when this podcast drops.
Are they my house band too?
They are your house band and your house band and your house band.
Even though I have a C and D?
Even though. Well, for now.
Well, that's true. Yeah. They are awesome. We can't wait to see them live on stage all week long, jamming out. They've got new stuff that they're going to be playing for us at the convention. Speaking of 5-Year Mission, Bill.
Well, we should tell people they should head on over to 5yearmission.net, get all their tunes.
They got a lot of them.
Yes, they do. And now, speaking of 5-Year Mission.
5-Year Mission. I was flipping through the stations just this morning. It's amazing. It always happens the day we podcast.
Oh,
we record
good
for the
gravy.
podcast. This was kind of a creepy story. I felt a little icky afterwards. I mean, there was Android hotties, and there was a duplicate Android drummer that was beamed up to the ship. And then over there was this giant robot Lurch. What are little Farks made of? And I got to tell you, I'm pretty sure that is a question that I do not want answered.
Nor do any of us. Let's just say it that way.
I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page.
Dan, we also have to thank Giancarlo C. He did the guitar version of the Star Trek movie theme. You heard it, in the supplemental we dropped this past Friday, and you hear it bookending some of our discussion today. What an amazing job. I love listening to his version of it almost as much as I love listening to the orchestral version.
Yes, and I will say this is probably the best of the 3 soundtracks for the Kelvin timeline I will throw out there as well.
I will too. So to find out more about Giancarlo, you can visit his YouTube channel. The link is either in the show notes on the podcast or on our website on trekgeeks.com. Dan, next week... we will be on the ground in Vegas, but we still have an episode dropping. So why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about?
Well, we're going to Vegas. It's going to be kind of cool. It's right around the corner. We are psyched. We may be a little delirious with that excitement, though, Bill, don't you think? Because next week we're going to be joined by Adam Drozen, and we're going to discuss Vegas. And as we are his official 36th favorite podcast, we felt that it would be a good idea to have him come on the show.
And we're dropping like a rock every week. We'll talk about Adam and his fandom and his love for Star Trek and how we met him last year. And we're going to go through the schedule and talk about the things we're really excited for this convention. So it's bound to be a great episode, so please join us next week. Of course, for more great Star Trek discussion, please check out our friends at the Tricorder Transmissions, Adam's favorite podcasts. Online, of course, at the tricordertransmissions.com. And for all the latest news on everything Star Trek, please visit our friends at treknews.net. For now, this has been episode 69 of the Trek Geeks podcast. We do hope you all live long and prosper.
I am coconutting on it.
Do I have to bleep that? I can't see you.
That's I can't see you, and that's not a bad thing.
Wow. Now that was a move.
Well, we should let the listeners know that this is the first time that we'll be recording without seeing each other's faces, and I can already tell it's going to be probably the best podcast we've ever done because I won't be nauseous.
Well, already that's a lie because we've done it plenty of times before.
Well,
why are you lying to the listeners?
We always start a little video at some point. We've always had a little video of the two of us at some point. Always, every episode. Except the ones that we've been in person. And that's even
except
worse.
For when we talk to guests.
Yeah, but then we turn video off. We've started at least with video.
You're full of lies.
Wow. I don't I don't work at a warehouse that is a studio and a warehouse and a studio.
Maybe you should.
Wow.
True believer.
Hashtag.
God, I wish Paramount and CBS would put out the type of Star Trek we want to see. Finally,
I know they just don't get it. They've just been just ignoring us for so many years.
I'm sorry. What?
Like they have, not you.
Huh?
Yeah. See. Okay.
Huh?
Yeah. You just be quiet.
Thank you.
Did you have a good day?
Sure. I went and saw Beyond again.
I know you did, you jerk. Did the missus like it?
Yeah, she thought it was okay. She has a hard time watching movies with very quick cuts.
Oh, yes.
And so there were times where this was distracting. We saw it in regular 2D. We didn't see it in IMAX or 3D or anything like that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So.
Well, good.
How about you? How was your day?
It was good. Let me go back to that for just 1 second before we get to my day. Did you like it better the second time?
Equally.
Nice. Good.
The emotional moments were still emotional.
Yeah. I was going to say because I remember the first day we met and we became friends and it was pretty cool. And then the second day, I knew it was just going to be awful.
What does that have to do with Star Trek Beyond?
Well, the seeing it twice thing. It was good the first time. Was it still good the second time? And the answer was yes. So that's good.
Oh, so that's a feeble attempt at making a joke at my expense.
Very feeble, but any joke at your expense is still worth it.
Wow, somebody's had a bug crawl up his ass tonight.
No, we haven't done a podcast for a week, so I miss you, pal.
That's how you miss me. That's how you miss me. What are you drinking?
I got a strawberry lemonade blueberry vodka drink.
Is that its technical name?
No, the Svedka vodka is a strawberry lemonade flavor, and then I throw my blueberries and my mixer in with it. It's very good. It's a summery drink.
Maybe you should give it a name.
I'm gonna call it the. I can't call it the Warp Core Breach, can I? That's already taken.
You could, in theory.
How about a plasma conduit?
The Nexus ribbon.
That would be good. Nexus ribbons would be nice. All right, I'll think of something. There's no coconut in it, so I can't have any fun with that.
Thank God.
Wow.